Welcome to another episode of Four Guys Talking About AI. I'm here with my buddies Neil Polachek and Greg Sterling. Hey guys, good to see you.
I'm admiring the paneling or wall covering in the background of
My
your
lovely background here.
yeah.
Looks like the beach scene.
Should we do an unboxing? I built a little studio here in the room and got my musical instruments over there and got a whole studio set up. So pretty excited about it. Hey, welcome to my studio. Good to have you guys there.
We haven't been together for a little while. There's a lot of stuff that's happened, obviously. What are we going to be talking about today?
Yeah, so in today's episode, we're going to go through a few stories. Big story today, so let's just cover off on this. Netflix is buying Warner Brothers for over $70 billion.
There's different numbers being reported. It's a lot of money.
It's over 70 billion, put it that way, and it's a huge deal. One of the biggest media deals ever. And while you have on the one side, you've got AI video tools like OpenAI's Sora and Google VO3 are getting scary good. What happens when streaming giants control the catalogs and AI can make the content? And I think there's a whole conversation in there we'll get into. Another story we're going to cover is a physician just called out the $340 billion in annual cost of car crashes in the U.S., arguing that self-driving tech could be a public health solution. And is he right? Well, we'll talk about that. I personally love Waymo, so I'm all for it. But let's unpack some of those details. And another story is we're going to be talking about AI and shopping, how assistants like ChatGPT may start influencing what people buy and where they buy it. And finally, the race between OpenAI and Google is heating up again. First, Google panicked about ChatGPT, and now OpenAI is scrambling to match VO's video power. And OpenAI has their own code red going right now to try to release their new version of ChatGPT. So let's get into it. Let's start off by talking about this Netflix Warner Brothers deal. Huge deal. And, what happens when you have streaming giants? You got, in Warner Brothers is HBO. You've got the whole Warner Brothers catalog, all of the production facilities over there. And when streaming giants can control the catalogs and AI can make the content, what does that look like? Throw it out to you guys. Greg, what do you think? Or Neil, go ahead.
I was going to just say that Time Warner has now been involved in two of the largest mergers ever. In 2000, Time Warner and AOL merged for it was a $182 billion deal that today would be $340 billion. So by comparison, this is actually a small deal. And that deal went bust, let's remember.
It was a different time, though, and I'll grant you that. But it was a different time, and we didn't have infrastructure. We didn't have mobile phones the way they are in everybody's pocket, and you have access to the internet and broadband, which that infrastructure now is a big difference in the whole ecosystem. And you have AI, which is that's another multiplier in its own right.
So. Well, Netflix bought or now has the 96 episodes of 6 seasons of Homeland. Maybe they're going to take that stuff and say, put it into a machine someday and say, build me 5 more seasons of this.
Well, right. They could train AI content production on this massive catalog. And I suspect that's part of the motivation here.
I mean, think about that. Think about that for a minute. They put in 96 episodes here and say, okay, give me 96 more episodes, right? And who's screwed out of that? The writers are definitely going to be panicked about this deal. But they've been panicked about AI for a while. The actors, if you don't need real actors anymore, I mean, it's it's fascinating what can go on with this thing.
Well, I think that the compatibility between Netflix and Warner Brothers is much greater than
for sure
Time
AOL.
Warner and AOL.
Yep.
And I think the AI piece is a hidden aspect of this deal, and the IP, the content. But I think they will be using it to train AI. I mean, you could train an AI tool to generate scripts. I mean, think about all those Hallmark movies, right? So you've got sort of your marquee productions, the really top tier stuff that people subscribe to see, and then you've got a lot of really mediocre content. And you could start cranking out tons and tons of that mediocre content very quickly through AI generated scripts like the Hallmark, Christmas series. It just presents lots of possibilities, lots of options for next Netflix to cut production costs and to generate a lot more content. And they now become the mandatory, they were arguably before the one streaming service that everybody had to have. The others are sort of more optional. And now that's really true. This will drive more subscriptions and more audience retention. So it's a lot of money, but it's kind of a win for them, I think.
And don't they get a bunch of live entertainment stuff in there too? There's sports stuff in there.
Yeah, there's probably some sports that
So they now move from on-demand streaming to live stuff, which is
they've been doing that though. They've been doing some live stuff.
Yeah, what happens is what's going to happen more is that you're going to see more podcasts on Netflix. They've been talking about that in terms of programming. They see how well it works on YouTube and on Spotify, and they're like, "Hey, we're not going to let people take our market share and our mind share." So you're going to see more of this kind of content actually on Netflix. When you look at the economics of the deal, Netflix's market cap is about between 425 to 440 billion. So this is about 15 to 16% of the overall value of Netflix, which is a good chunk of the company. I mean, that's a big deal for Netflix. I wouldn't be surprised if you had an AI company down the road buy Netflix, just buy the whole enchilada, and maybe this is step one in a bigger plan. Who knows? But
that would be a lot of money, Andy, though.
It would be, but you have OpenAI, who is really aggressively wanting to become $1 trillion company quickly, and I wouldn't put it out of range for a company like that to say, hey, with a catalog like that, what could you do with a AI engine like Sora? I don't know if it would get past. I don't know what the value is of the FCC these days, really, for regulation, but I don't know if it would get past them.
Why wouldn't it be the other way around?
I don't think Netflix has the budget to buy OpenAI. OpenAI is on a trajectory to be a multi-trillion-dollar company. They're not gonna get bought for less than what Netflix's value is.
Yeah. So what the writers strike yielded from producers and studios is, studios are not able to use AI to create drafts or revisions and then ask writers to polish. So basically, right now, the existing writers contract prohibits what we're talking about. You can't generate a bunch. I mean, it's going to happen regardless.
You can do whatever you want, but look at Sora creating all kinds of video around any dead person that that exists, and you can create tons of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood videos and Tupac videos and all these videos that Martin Luther King and so forth, and they don't care.
Well, in Denmark, they passed a law. I believe they passed a law that every individual owns their own likeness, and so you have to get consent to use an individual's likeness. Now, I would imagine the estates, whoever controls the estates of these different deceased celebrities, can sue to block the use of that person's likeness in a commercial
following
context.
the rules, right? That's like if you care.
Well, I mean, you'll have some litigation. You definitely will have some litigation. I mean, I can imagine, however, that think about the Warner Brothers catalog. I mean, I don't know how big it is. It's got to be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of movies that stretch back to the early part of the 20th century, and they could take any of these movie stars from the 50s, 60s, 70s who are no longer alive and create new vehicles around them, take their images and build
Create
stories.
new movies. New
Right.
movies.
Okay, so that's where it is today. If you look at Sora and how OpenAI is, just like, go ahead, make whatever you want. We don't care. So you have that. And then on that, if you pull on that string, which you don't have to pull very hard, you can look at what's happening in the market with the acceleration of these models. And, OpenAI has their code red moment right now with got to go faster. And Google's working on VO9 internally. They're on VO3 that's been distributed now. You have to imagine that in a very short period of time, you're going to be able to create videos that are an hour long plus, a whole film if you want, pretty soon.
The lengths of most streaming series shows are between 30 minutes and 55 minutes.
So that's a breeze. That should be a breeze soon. Right now, you can do 8 seconds on VO3. That's where we are today. Probably, a year from today, I'll go on record to say it's going to be at least 3 times that, 5 times that, more than that. You're going to be able to make 30-second spots pretty soon here like that.
Coke has done that now with their Christmas ads for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're using people and multiple tools to accomplish that, but it'll be, as you say, much more possible and cheaper to do that.
I think you could stitch together 8-second videos until you get to
30.
a minute or two or whatever, very easily, very quickly.
So I think that where we're going to see this is we're going to see it in commercials. We're going to see it in online, a lot of online content with AI video. We'll see it initially in animated context, certainly in special effects in live action films, but animated context. OpenAI is working on a full length animated feature right now with somebody else, and it'll radically change computer animation. I think it will be slower to come to live action than, I mean, maybe in some very stylized situations it'll work, but I think you risk, at least for this initial generation of viewers, you risk a kind of backlash against it. There's been a big backlash against the Coke Christmas ads. I mean, they've gotten a lot of PR, but and it probably one way or another doesn't affect who buys Coke and who drinks Coke, but there is this risk that it will do some brand damage if you don't do this carefully and do it the right way. But an isolated program here or there is not going to damage Netflix's brand. So it'll be interesting to see how that rolls out. But you're totally right. Eventually, this will be a dominant tool in the creation of entertainment, music, film, such as it is, animation, documentaries, because it brings the price down so radically. That's the driver. You could, one positive way to look at this is like it may create a new generation of young filmmakers who can create movies or movie equivalents for very, very little money and give them a way to get exposure, so that might be a positive thing.
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, and the question becomes, does Netflix buy those movies, right? Because ultimately, unlike YouTube, where you can just upload them and get your own audience and do that, on Netflix, you have gatekeepers and curators who are buying the content, and that's the end game for a lot of filmmakers.
I think you've identified what the battle is going forward. It's Netflix versus YouTube in terms of ad revenue. It's like, and they both coexist. It's not one or the other, but I mean, YouTube is the number one streaming service. It has more viewers than Netflix does. And Netflix's ad-supported tier is growing very quickly, and that's where a lot of their future revenue may come from. And they will
raise their prices too now.
They will continue they will continue to raise prices as a strategy to push people into the ad-supported tier. That's what price they'll figure, hey, the people that want to pay for this, great. Let's let them keep paying more and more and more and more. I'm paying $24 a month now for Netflix.
Speaking
a lot of
of
money.
the ad-supported business, I did see a note in the last day or two that the global ad business now is $1 trillion on a global basis. So there's a lot of money flowing around in the global,
Right.
ad budgets. $1 trillion.
Yeah.
Right. And they'll go where these giant audiences are. I mean,
Right.
Disney is the other one. So it's like Netflix and Prime to some degree. So it's Disney, it's Netflix, YouTube, Amazon, and Disney are become the main players going forward. And these other ankle biters are sort of, maybe they get bundled in, like Prime is pushing a lot of bundles, but there's like 20 video streaming services, and half of them nobody pays any attention to.
Like Tubi?
MGM. Well, no. I'm talking about like AMC Plus and MGM Plus and I mean, I can't even name them all.
They're like boutique streaming services.
Right, and they have one or two shows that you're interested in seeing.
That whole space is going to be really compelling. And again, not saying that any of these guys are going to buy Netflix or anything like that. In fact, maybe what happens with this is that you have these mega deals that happen with with Google and OpenAI, who are generating. They've got these great AI generation tools, and then Netflix is the IP owner. Who knows? We'll see what happens with all of that. But moving on to the next story. Self-driving cars and the safety of self-driving cars. So there's an article in the New York Times where a physician who wrote the article just called out the $340 billion cost of car crashes in the US, arguing that self-driving tech could be a public health solution. Is he right? So let's talk a little bit about this.
He pointed to some data that I guess Waymo gave him, where it's totally conclusive data, at least from Waymo, that the incidence of accidents is significantly lower in self-driving cars than in human-driven cars. And, probably a lot of that data came out of San Francisco because they've been there the longest. But, his view is we got to accelerate the adoption and deployment of these things. And, he put a number on it as $1 trillion annually in economic and quality of life toll associated with car crashes. And, as I was saying to Greg earlier, that all that data that he's looking at is at lower speeds on surface streets, because those Waymos are now just being allowed on highways and stuff. So the data may change a bit, but even if it's slightly more, even the difference goes down slightly, it's still a big gap between human driving and self-driving cars. And the safety numbers are just indisputable, Greg, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a big surprise that that's the case, but it's interesting. Depending on how you count it, there are somewhere between 300,000 and 400,000 drivers, professional drivers, including cab drivers, people who drive black cars, and ride sharing drivers in the United States. And those are the people who stand potentially to lose if this happens. But I think ultimately, if think about a situation where you could just get rid of your car because you could so reliably count on these vehicles to show up wherever you were, to take you from A to B. I mean, the one thing they don't do is wait, but take you from A to B at a reasonable cost. But
or you could have your own self-driving car, and which
yes,
are
right, and people will do that. That's right. People will have their own self-driving cars, and but in a situation where you didn't need a car, I mean, that would be helpful for seniors and people who don't drive anymore. It would reduce insurance costs for individuals. The companies would bear those costs, and presumably rates would go down because there are fewer accidents, and they can negotiate better rates. So I mean, I have no issue with any of this. I think that it's a very positive development. It's really a remarkable development. I mean, we take it so for granted, but like when you're driving through the city, my daughter lives in San Francisco, and I'll drive to her apartment, and there's like 2 or 3
all of them.
Waymo. Waymo's around me, and there's nobody driving them. It's science fiction, and it's just it's astonishing that this technology works. And now we've all assimilated this, and just this is the expectation. It's kind of amazing to me.
The data shows how good it works. It's not just working; it works really well.
And let's go through some of the data, right? So 91% fewer serious car crashes, right? So Waymo's self-driving cars had 91% fewer serious injuries or worse car crashes than humans on the same roads. It's not just safer, it's game changing. And the biggest problem is with intersections, and Waymo's basically fixed that, which is saying that 96% fewer injury causing crashes at intersections in a Waymo. So, these aren't just like incrementally just a little bit better than humans. This is total game changing data. And that's the argument that this author is talking about. Neil, you were talking at the beginning of the podcast before we started to record that car crashes are costing over $1 trillion a year.
Well, that's what he put the number at. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
in medical costs,
military budget or Medicare budget on an annual basis.
It's more than U.S. military and Medicare budget together.
It's insurance money paying healthcare costs because of car accidents,
which are us paying insurance companies paying those bills,
right? Which our rates reflect.
Yeah. So there's a financial impact to this.
And the other side of that are the drivers who will be unhappy about it. The auto repair guys, auto body repair shops will be unhappy about it. The insurance companies will be unhappy about it, presumably. If the incidence goes down, they can't keep raising the prices on insurance. I mean, there will people who will.
Don't underestimate their greed, Neil.
Oh, of course, they'll fight it.
You think that no, you think that they will stop raising prices or reduce prices because they have fewer costs? No, they will try and protect their margins and continue to raise prices regardless of their costs. When electronic manufacturing was outsourced to China, did prices come down radically? In some cases, yes, like televisions, but for the most part, no. They just pocketed the margin. That's what capitalism is. You reduce your costs and you pocket the margin, and you try and keep raising costs.
There will be people who will push against the rapid deployment of these things, for sure.
Oh, for sure. But I mean, I think
the insurance industry is going to push back the hardest because they've got the most to lose. And in a world that we live in now, where we have is going to have higher healthcare costs, insurance companies are kind of they're loving this moment, but they also see that being a big threat to their business. So I could see them pushing back hard on regulation around Waymo's expansion.
I mean, without sort of digressing too much here, what is the argument against it? The only argument against it that they could get behind is jobs. This is going to take away jobs because they're not going to use safety. They would typically say, "Oh, these vehicles are unsafe. We can't allow them to be on our streets because they're going to create more accidents." That would be one political argument they could make, but that's contradicted by the data. So they have to say, this is going to take away jobs and put people out of work. That will be the argument that they make behind proxies. But we'll see.
It's the AI argument right there. And see, it's happening. So that would be, it's a good, I could see that being their argument.
Now, the Waymos have killed one dog and one cat, I have read recently, and that's a big issue,
Yeah, but last year, 39,000 Americans died in car crashes, right? So
you don't read about that. You read about the dog killed by the Waymo.
This is not an AI story. There was a cop in Missouri, I think it was Missouri, who the small town where the police acted as animal control at the same time, came out. There was a small dog that got out of its yard. And the frustrated cop who couldn't corral the dog shot the dog. Okay, and this was like that which ultimately forced the resignation of the mayor of this small town and resulted in a $500,000 judgment for the dog's aggrieved
owner,
grief-stricken owner. So those are potentially lucrative opportunities for litigation and for throw your cat in front of the Waymo and see what happens.
maybe you can get a judgment too.
That's right. I'm looking to retire. Here goes the cat.
Oh man!
Look, Waymo killed my beloved cat. I need $1 million.
Yeah, I was going to say the car crashes are the number 2 cause of death for young people, and this could fix that. This could really
Oh yeah.
and just like your daughter, Greg, my daughter takes Waymo all the time. If they go to a party or what have you, nobody's driving. There's no drunk driving going on.
Nobody's getting drunk and getting behind the wheel, which a lot of young people are inclined to do. I'll say this as a sort of a final matter. One of the reasons why humans do so much worse than these autonomous vehicles is because people are on their phones all the time.
Distraction.
Yeah. I mean,
100%.
if you had somebody really paying close attention, not on their phone, that would probably bring the fatalities and accidents way down.
Brains that we daydream, we space out even without the phone.
It's true.
We get tired. Anyway, let's move on to the next topic. Okay, so let's talk about AI and shopping. There's been really interesting advancements just recently that's been happening with how assistants like ChatGPT may start influencing what people buy and where they buy it. Greg, you want to lead off with this one?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of data which we don't need to go into in detail. We're just coming off in the United States. We're just coming off of the whole Black Friday, Cyber Weekend, Small Business Saturday business. And, everybody came out with their numbers, Salesforce and Adobe and MasterCard and some others. It was pretty much business as usual. E-commerce is up by single digits year over year. A lot of people, buying, looking for discounts online. The thing that was most interesting to me was the Salesforce data, and Adobe had some of this too, that AI traffic is people were using AI as part of their shopping process. And Adobe said that $22 billion, there was some confusion in the numbers, but basically they tweeted $22 billion of global sales over the past week were influenced or impacted by AI, which includes ChatGPT and related and shopping assistants on retail websites. So if you go to a retail website and you start engaging with that, and the sort of big takeaway from all the data, and there's a very interesting study by Profound, which is one of the sort of AI analytics companies that I shared recently, where they're saying that more than half of the audience is using AI as part of its shopping process, and they're making decisions in the context of these AI searches, these comparisons that they're doing. Best fill in the blank, or this one versus that one. Show me the best TV for under $1,000. Blah blah blah. That they're engaging with those kinds of queries, and then after they've sort of made a decision or gotten it down to a couple of choices, then they go to Google, or then they go to Amazon, or then they go to a retailer website, and the transaction happens there. But the bulk of the decision making is happening within AI. And that's a really interesting phenomenon that's under the radar for most companies that are measuring traffic referrals, because AI right now is only about 1% of Google's traffic. But that number doesn't reflect the influence that AI is having. And, so as I said, Salesforce said about 22 billion was impacted or influenced by AI. So this is a really big use case for consumers who understand what the value of it is and are engaging pretty deeply around shopping, finding deals, comparing products. So I just think it's really interesting, and it raises all these questions about how do you get into those results, and that's a whole discussion about AI optimization and what the sources. Yeah.
Can I ask a question to you guys? Do either of you guys have an agent to do these kinds of things for you? Yeah. I mean,
I've used the agent function to do some trip planning. Where
you talk about ChatGPT agent mode.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, like, if this was this year, think about next year when X number of million Americans and people globally have agents to do this, right? I don't think.
Well, all that is just asking ChatGPT to do some kind of research,
right?
Well, the transactions are not coming next year. in any kind of mass scale. They may be 2 years, 3 years out. That will ultimately probably happen, but there's a bunch of stuff that needs to happen before that takes place. People need to trust it. Security issues need to be resolved. A lot of website issues need to be addressed because these bots are getting bounced from websites that have pop-ups or cookie banners. The websites are not structured in such a way that agents can easily navigate them and transact at this point. So there's a bunch of friction and obstacles before we have true agent buying, but it will come. But people will use AI more and more to reduce the number of choices down to 3 or 2 or whatever, and then to make shopping much more efficient than it is.
Interesting kind of an idea here, which I could imagine, um, the trackability of you discovering something on a Shopify store or in an Instagram reel or where a TikTok video, and then you start doing your research. You go to maybe the website to go check it out, and then you go to ChatGPT and you have a conversation with ChatGPT before you buy it, and all of that data can get linked where ChatGPT pulls in all of that preliminary pre-shopping information to basically close the deal. And I could see that being a very well worn kind of path for shopping behavior, right? People do this all the time now. And OpenAI, I'm sure, has with their Shopify integration, they're making it so that you don't have to leave ChatGPT. You just purchase.
Well, that's totally trackable, right? If you transact within OpenAI with ChatGPT, then that's very trackable because they know transactions happen. They're going to take a piece of that transaction.
Yes.
No problem. But
Yeah.
for all the people saying, "Oh, Google is Google is the thing that's influencing all the, my leads or transactions." That's, it's kind of like social media. There's brand awareness that's happening. It's like brand awareness is happening over here through many different influences. Then you've got like mid-funnel stuff where people are doing these comparisons. This plumber versus that plumber, this TV versus that TV, this B2B software versus that B2B software. And then, the transaction is happening somewhere else in many of these cases. I'm going to Amazon at the last minute to buy the steering wheel cover that I discovered or compared on ChatGPT. And the seller on Amazon has no idea about the path to purchase at all. They just see Amazon.
Yeah, here's some other stats to support what you're saying. There is that, if you look at shopping behavior, over half of shoppers plan to use AI chatbots for deals. This is a survey. This is sourced by Digiday, and 47% plan to use AI to summarize reviews before buying. So people are using these tools more and more in their purchase process and their path to purchase.
Their evaluation process.
Absolutely. And higher conversions, 38% are more likely to buy via an AI assisted path. Adobe.
Is that because the AI tools are generally empathetic and encouraging of stuff? Like, well, that's a good choice.
I'm not sure what the result is. It could be because of that, and it could also be because people are getting answers to their questions enough where they're satisfied to say, "Okay, I want this now. I'm going to buy it." Adobe data shows that shoppers arriving via AI chat services were 38% more likely to convert than those from non-AI traffic sources. So,
but don't you think maybe some of that that's a good choice? Some of that language that's thrown in there.
I don't at all. I don't know. I don't at all.
Greg?
I think all that stuff matters. That it just greases the wheel. It's just like, Greg, that's a good idea. You should buy that. Of course, you're gonna be like, you know what? I am great. I'm gonna buy it.
Well, it may encourage transactions like frivolous transactions or something, like, hey, go ahead and buy those shoes or buy that whatever, but I think that people are becoming more educated. Prior to AI, the process of trying to shop for things was pretty inefficient. mean, you could go to Amazon and read a bunch of reviews. You could go back and forth from Google to websites or third-party directories that purported to compare things, and it was just a really clunky, inefficient process. And AI introduces a kind of a much more efficient. I mean, we can argue about the completeness of the data that AI has access to, but it introduces a much faster and more efficient process. I mean, I'm living that in
And
my
an
own.
encouraging one often. I just think there's something to that too, Greg.
That has the biggest impact if you're listening to the advanced voice mode. The text, right? So if you're on the desktop and you're typing and you say, should I buy the frame by Samsung or should I buy this cheap TCL TV that cost me less than a third of the price? The thing might say, "Oh, these are both good choices," blah 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 blah, and go through the comparison, and that's going to have much less of an impact on me psychologically than if I'm interacting with it as a quasi human, where I'm saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about this. Oh, that's excellent. You're really making good decisions." Then it might have some kind of psychological impact on me, but not in the conventional text
Okay.
keyboard mode.
More and more, my search results in ChatGPT are saying at the end when I compare products and I'm looking in this, and I'm looking for the right product, the right microphone, for example, or what have you. It'll compare those different microphones and it'll say, "But Andy, based on your, because you're a blah blah blah, it knows whatever it knows about me. My recommendation is this."
Right. So
It's doing
that's
that.
influential. That's
That's
influential.
influential. That is not just objective.
Especially when you have like these very expensive focus groups, when you have people coming in and you're looking over their shoulder going like, what drives the biggest conversion, a blue button or a red button, or is it square or is it rounded edges, or is it just over to the left or to the right? And when you have that kind of a usability study and you extrapolate that into this kind of chat environment, which is way more intimate, I think these have a huge amount of influence over the shopping experience.
We'll beat Greg down eventually, and he'll agree with
Nope.
us.
No, you won't. You won't. You won't.
Well, here's what I want to know. Okay, since
You
we're
won't.
on the topic of OpenAI and ChatGPT, we talked earlier before the show started about the economics and could they ever be big enough? And maybe you weren't even on it yet, Andy. But like, is the full scale rollout of the ad model Q1?
Well, so this is a segue into our code red conversation. So
Right.
there was some code, Android code, that was exposed that suggested they were about to roll out ads or getting close to rolling out ads. And one of the things that was said when they declared code red because of Gemini 3 is that they're going to suspend some of these other projects or delay them or put them aside while they focus on the core product to make sure that it's competitive with Google, or that it sort of leapfrogs to the next stage. I mean, I think they're hungry for money and they need to roll out ads, and I think we'll see something in next year. It's a question of, is it going to be Q1, is it going to be Q2, or will they wait?
$1 trillion of ad spend out there to go after.
Well, the interesting thing that Google is starting to do, Google's starting to put ads in AI mode. So AI mode is their ChatGPT. They've got Gemini, which is the true ChatGPT competitor. Then they've got AI mode, which is sort of next in line. It's a sort of a hybrid ChatGPT style experience with search, and they're starting to put ads there. And those are just kind of run of the mill Google ads that you might see on a mobile device. They are going to have to invent some new ad units for that to be truly successful.
It'll be conversational as well, right?
Yeah, there will need to be new types of ad units that really take advantage of that experience for them to be really successful with it.
And so the question is, does it become a mention, or does it become like how far do you want to lean into it? Like, do you want to mention? Do you want us to make a recommendation? Do you want us to, offer a link? Like what?
Well,
Yeah.
Google search ads, as opposed to display ads or whatever, have been billed on a CPC basis, cost per click. And, a lot of sort of brand-oriented advertising elsewhere on the internet is CPM, right? Cost per thousand. And so that raises a question about what's the model here, because a lot of times people are not clicking on things in an AI context. They're reading, they're absorbing information, but they're not necessarily clicking through to a website. And so, if you have a brand campaign that talks about, here's this new TV, or here's this revolutionary new microphone or hair care product or whatever, is this a brand advertising medium? Is this a performance medium? Is it both? And what do you do? Do you measure do you measure the impression? Do you measure the click? Because if they measure the click, then people are going to get a lot of value out of advertising without having to pay for it, unless they punish people whose ads don't get clicks. I don't know. It's interesting to contemplate.
I'm very wrong about this, but my gut tells me that they're going to start from the bottom of the funnel and work their way up and try to
Yes.
capture the dollars, where they say to an advertiser, great, you can advertise on our platform. We take the transaction, and that's how we know that a transaction happened. And you pay us for that transaction, and that'll include your ad budget. And depending on how much you want to pay us, depends on how much inventory we'll give you.
I would think they're furiously building this.
Yeah, I think so.
I bet it's number 2 on their list of things.
You're talking about Google or OpenAI?
OpenAI. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a priority for them for sure. They've hired a lot of people who have expertise in ads. I mean, they hired a bunch of people from Facebook. The woman who's their de facto CEO now, if I'm gonna mispronounce her name, Fichisimo, I believe. She came from Facebook, Meta. She was the CEO of Instacart before this. She's an ad person.
Yeah.
She's an ad person, and she is kind of the de facto CEO of the company. Altman is out there doing PR, and she's really running the operation. And I suspect that that they're very, very serious about developing a viable ad product as a revenue stream. There was an HSBC analysis of ChatGPT, the economics behind ChatGPT, and where they're going to get their revenue streams and what they've said. And the conclusion, I mean, this is sort of a oversimplification, is that they can never meet their commitments. They can never meet their financial commitments because they're just too many and too big. And, so they have to get revenue from multiple sources in the near term. Subscription revenue, which they're aggressively projecting was going to grow, ad revenue, and transactions revenue. Those are their 3 legs of the stool. So, I mean, it's going to be sooner rather than later.
It is. I think it's also interesting to note that Google is, arguably the largest online ad company and platform, and has the deepest.
Not arguably.
Right. I mean, but so given that, you also have to imagine that because of the depth that's there, they churn a lot of advertisers because advertisers have a crappy customer experience after the click. So they'll buy the clicks for a while, but if they're not getting a return on ad spend, they're going to churn out. Whereas if the end game is for a platform to take the transaction and just own that customer experience end to end, you have to imagine that Google is maybe not a code red on this internally, but I would imagine they have to have some kind of task force saying, if OpenAI is going to go for the transaction and that's their game, then, and I'm not saying that it is, but given the Shopify deal that they just put together, they're tipping their hand a bit. But let's say that if that's the case, I would imagine that Google is looking at all kinds of ways to be able to control the customer experience end to end and not send traffic over to crappy user experiences, and convert those visitors, get a return on ad spend, and really own those ad dollars as much as possible.
One model for that is, beyond the sort of transactions model for commerce, Google has these local service ads that appear at the top of the page when you look for HVAC or lawyer or plumber or dentist.
Yeah.
and those are very appealing to people because they have pictures, they have reviews and ratings, and then you click through to them and you get a Google Business Profile like experience
Yes.
where you have a lot of information that you would see in an organic context normally, and people that's where a lot of clicks come from on those kinds of search results, and that's the kind of thing that you're talking about. It's a lead gen, it's a lead gen model. It's not a click model, and people are paying, varying prices depending on how competitive the segment is, how much a lead is worth. Sometimes hundreds of dollars for like personal injury lawyers, and I think ChatGPT could do something like that. It just occurred to me that one of their, I mean, they probably wouldn't do this, but one of the ways forward for them is to buy somebody like Yelp and to use the Yelp data, which is not as good as, Google's data, obviously, but and then to use an RFP like, which they could probably build an RFQ system to send leads to local contractors or local businesses, which they track either through call tracking numbers or landing pages or messaging, um, you know, and that's a revenue source at scale for them.
Yeah, and they own that entire experience. There's no reason to
Right.
send anybody to a landing page. You're already
Right.
in the platform asking it,
That's
here's
right.
your expression. Do you want me to have them call you right now? And it just does that.
Right. I just hired a plumber using that system on Yelp, which I sometimes will use. And he said they pay $16 to $20 per lead, which is not that much. Against depending on the job, couple $100 or
Yeah,
more.
yeah. That's a good
I mean,
ROI.
if you're doing that at scale, that's a lot of revenue potentially.
Yeah.
I want to go back to one more point about this ad market, trillion-dollar ad market. 40% of that is spent on us here in the United States. We represent 4.2% of the global population. Just spend some time with those numbers. I've always been fascinated by those numbers. It's
I mean, there's a lot of money flowing around, and those ad dollars are
in the US.
big market, no doubt.
Yeah.
Good conversation today. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. And thank you for listening, everybody. And we will catch you next week with more.
We'll
We
see you
will.
next time.
All right, everybody.